Two sentences to jolt the caffeine straight into your brain. Imagine XRP shattering the $3 ceiling like it's made of wet cardboard, then rocketing to 10, 20, maybe even 42 bucks. Sounds outrageous, right? Well, stick with me because by the end of this story, you might just wonder if that number is too low. Now, it might just shock you, but I am not a financial advisor and nothing in this video is financial advice. Cryptocurrencies are highly volatile and you could lose all of the money that you invest. You should always do your own research and consult a qualified professional. Your investments are entirely your responsibility and you should know that nothing is ever guaranteed when it comes to investing. Neither I, this channel, nor YouTube are liable for any losses, and this video is for entertainment and educational purposes only. Okay, so deep breath because we're about to go spelunking into the trenches of cross-border liquidity, ChatGPT simulations, and the wild idea that banks might one day treat XRP the way that most of us treat coffee. Absolutely essential and gone in 60 seconds. Now, picture me hunched over my laptop at 2 a.m. A half-eaten shawarma on my side, a tsunami of spreadsheets on the other, and somewhere in between is pure curiosity. Now, I wanted to know, what would it actually take for XRP to leap from today's stubborn $2 and some change neighborhood to a jaw-dropping $42.50 figure swirling around crypto Twitter? Now, first, let's talk about the pain. Now, I've watched XRP for the last 5 months, and you know exactly what I mean, right? We've seen 3 separate attempts to smash past $3, and in the very same way that a cat meets a freshly mopped floor. The claws are out, the legs are spinning, and there's zero traction. Now, every time that the candle kind of kisses that resistance line, sellers, they just pile on like bargain hunters on Black Friday. And if you're holding a bag, it kind of hurts, right? Now, I get DMs from viewers saying, Nick, my patience is thinner than a Bitcoin block in 2011. And so I started hunting for something concrete. You know, some metric that didn't rely on moonboy hopium or conspiracy theories evolving and involving the kind of IMF secret XRP vault. I mean, come on, guys. Right? And that is when I landed on an eye-opening data point from macro analyst Marty Party. Now, he added up the M2 money supply of the US, China, Japan, and the EU. That is about $83.37 trillion. But here is the kicker. Historically, only 10 to 15% of that actually sloshes around and across borders as liquidity for banks to settle international IOUs. So you can split the difference here and you get roughly $10 trillion dedicated to cross-border payments. Now, $10 trillion is such a mind-numbing number that my browser actually kind of stuttered when I typed it into Excel. So let's kind of bring it down to earth. Imagine a stack of $100 bills reaching from Dubai to the summit of Everest. Then multiply that stack by almost 30. And that's the pool that XRP could swim in. So the question here is, how big a slice of that pool can Ripple realistically capture? Enter ChatGPT, my late night accomplice. Now, I asked the model to play out 2 scenarios. And the first scenario is a full capture fantasy. Now, XRP becomes the go-to infrastructure for 25% of global cross-border liquidity. So that's $2.5 trillion that sits in XRP at any given moment. You can divide that number by the circulating supply of 58.82 billion tokens, and the price of XRP lands at a whopping $42.50. Velocity reality check. Now here we have to factor in how fast each token changes hands, and its velocity. So if banks and payment corridors flip the same 5 XRP a year, well, The network only needs $500 billion locked in. It's the same math, but the new outcome is an $8.50 XRP. But the story doesn't end there. If velocity slows to 2 turns per year, maybe regulatory bottlenecks, maybe cautious compliance teams, suddenly we're back at $21.25. So speed it up to 10 turns and you're chilling at $4.25. In other words, token velocity is like the gearbox in your sports car. You shift it right and you fly. You grind it wrong and you stall. Now, let me sprinkle in a quick personal anecdote. Last month, I wired some freelance cash from Dubai to a friend in Brazil. Now, between Swift codes and daylight robbed kind of exchange fees, I lost 4% of the principal and 12 hours of my life. Meanwhile, a buddy of mine used XRP's on-demand liquidity through a local exchange, zipped value across continents in under 3 minutes, and paid less than a cup of tea. Now that is when the kind of proverbial kind of light bulb kind of flickered. If that frictionless magic scales, banks will jump faster than my cousin chasing an airdrop. Still, let's address the elephant tap dancing in the room. It's called trust. Now, traditional banks, they don't exactly hand the kind of steering wheel to a new tech overnight. They need compliance checklists, longer than a blockchain itself, and risk officers who treat change like it's a bowl of suspicious egg salad. Yet ripple effects, pun fully intended, are already showing here. You got Banco Santander, the same Santander that debanked Chris for investing in XRP. They're actually testing already. SBI Japan onboarded already. The UAE's, own central bank tapped Ripple for a pilot cross-border corridor just last quarter. That's not smoke. Well, that's the tip of the potential bonfire. And here is a stat nugget, right? The global cross-border payments market is projected to balloon to nearly $290 billion in revenue by 2030, according to EY. Now that's revenue, that is not volume. So that's meaning that the fat fees that we're waiting to actually be trimmed. So if Ripple slices those margins while giving banks sub-second settlement, well, even the kind of sloggiest kind of banker might actually be very tempted. Now, your next question might just be, Nick, if it's so clear, why aren't we mooning already? And it's one word, regulation, right? The SEC saga has potentially and partially kind of thought, but Ripple, lowercase r, effects, of litigation is linear, right? So some institutions, they still treat XRP a bit like hot lava, right? Just without the chicken. Until there's a global harmonized framework, velocity remains kind of throttled. But here is where the patience could actually pay. The G20 is pushing hard on cross-border CBDC compatible standards. Whether you kind of love or hate central bank digital currencies, a standard means common rails. So XRP was literally designed to be a bridge asset between desperate kind of ledgers, if you will, right? Now, that's kind of like building a toll road right before the traffic season. Let's pivot to the problem of liquidity depth though, right? Even if we can magically secure 25% of that $10 trillion pool, you need enough exchange order book depth so that big institutions don't slosh markets every single transaction. And that's kind of where partner exchanges, yes, including Blofin, so you can come into the play. Full disclosure, of course, the Blofin link in the description is an affiliate link, so using it helps kind of support the channel. But what I love is that they're actually pumping serious resources into their liquidity hubs, ensuring that whales don't just turn price candles into roller coasters. Now, do you remember how I mentioned token velocity a couple of times? You probably did. And here is kind of the mind bend then. Velocity itself can accelerate when liquidity tightens, the exact opposite of what you see in the traditional markets. Why? It's because in crypto, the same digital asset is just a kind of keystroke away from a new address. Now, banks could theoretically ping pong the very same XRP dozens of times a day, drastically upping the velocity and lowering the price floor requirement. And that is why the $42.50 figure is a ceiling, not a prophecy. Still, even a kind of mid-single digit velocity pushes price well above today's kind of stagnant $2 zone. Okay, so let me paint a scenario, right? It's 2027. A consortium of 10 multinational banks decide that they're tired of the swift delays. They allocate a slither of their cross-border liquidity, let's say 4%, onto the XRPL corridors. Now that sliver equates to roughly $400 billion. Token velocity averages 3 per year because compliance teams move slower than my grandma's dial-up, and the price math is about $2.27, basically where we're at right now. But, and this is the kicker, right? The moment the velocity nudges to 5, that very same $400 billion supports $2 trillion in yearly flows, and the price leaps forwards to about $3.80, all without a single extra dollar of liquidity. So it's leverage, but it's not the risky kind, it's actually the efficiency kind. And speaking of efficiency, if you want to get hands-on demo with how quickly you can move assets, you want to pop into our free educational Discord server. There's a link chilling in the description. We do live testnets, Oracle feed breakdowns, and yes, occasional meme wars. You can bring your questions. The mods brew stronger coffee than an Italian espresso bar. Virtually anyway. All right, let's zoom out because opportunity rarely announces itself with a brass band. It kind of creeps in between the headlines, disguised as boring settlement stats and regulatory white papers. But when business models, pivot, they pivot fast. Let's remember Blockbuster, right? 1 year, everyone was kind of rewinding tapes. 2 years later, we were streaming Netflix in our pajamas. Cross-border finance could flip just as abruptly, as we saw with some of these other juggernauts in the past, right? So the first handful of kind of juggernauts kind of prove the XRP thesis at scale. And it brings me to the narrative climax of my little all-nighter here. Right? At about 4 a.m., after kind of drowning in kind of BIS reports and toggling kind of ChatGPT parameters like a DJ at kind of Tomorrowland, I realized something, right? Price is not destiny. It's a mirror reflecting utility, velocity, and yes, human psychology. So if XRP becomes the boring kind of plumbing that nobody actually talks about because it just works, congrats, we've won. And at that point, a $42.50 token is not hype. It's just a byproduct, like steam from a locomotive. Now, I am not saying that you should be selling your fridge and mortgage your dog. I'm just saying that you should keep one eye on the macro chessboard. Watch how many institutions kind of test ODL corridors. Count how often Ripple's name kind of pops up in BIS roundtables. You can track velocity metrics on the public ledger, and each kind of data point is a tile in the kind of mosaic, right? Miss enough tiles and you just can't see the picture, but catch them early and you might actually just be able to front run the kind of paradigm shift. All right, here's a quick coffee break reckoning then, right? Worst case scenario, regulatory red tape keeps velocity high and adoption trickles. XRP kind of memendas at $4 to $6 by decade's end, right? The best case scenario, or base case I should say, is that corridors kind of spread like Wi-Fi. Velocity hums at 5 and we're flirting with $8 to $10. The best case scenario is banks clutch XRP like a life raft. Velocity kind of remains modest and we kind of orbit $40 mark. None of those outcomes require sci-fi token burns or a secret A-list partnership, just boring, old-fashioned adoption. And if you're itching to explore, Blofin's affiliate link waits patiently downstairs. Right, snagging an account not only supports the channel here, but also gives you access to their liquidity sandbox, where you can simulate institutional-grade transfers without needing a yacht-sized balance. So you can think of it as kind of crypto parkour, but safer jumps and softer landings. things. Now, before we kind of wrap up, a moment of reflection, right? This entire journey from Marty Party's $83 trillion revolution to ChatGPT's velocity gymnastics has taught me that price predictions are not prophecies. They're just conversation starters. Like they kind of force us to, quantify what the hope is, to stress test the hype and decide whether a narrative is kind of worth our limited mental bandwidth. So you might be thinking, what are our takeaways? Well, you got one. Cross-border payments remain colossal, under innovated mansion kind of begging, I guess, for brand new plumbing. And then you got two, right? XRP is uniquely built to kind of be that plumbing, right? Provided regulators don't kind of weld the pipes shut, that is. And then three, right? Token velocity could actually make or break the moonshot. 4, right? Even conservative adoption scenarios lift price far beyond and above today's kind of glass ceiling. 5, your due diligence. Yes, you with the earbuds in. It matters more than any YouTuber's price target.